Bad morning, everybody. Today is 2018. This is episode 61 of Bad Morning News. Thanks for joining us this morning for all the news you're not likely to hear on the mainstream media because it's not in their interest to share certain things with you. And a lot of these things are depressing, tend to be negative, but unfortunately, I believe that reflects reality of many aspects of life today. In any event, thank you to Brave Browser for sponsoring the show. If you go to brave.com/bad944, you can benefit the show if you download Brave Browser at that link. Thanks to anyone considering doing that. Once again, thank you to Brave Browser for sponsoring the show. We also have a Patreon. And in any event, I'm Cryptic Cynic here with you this morning. I'll also mention that Bad Morning News is looking for other hosts for the show. If you're interested in doing this morning slot or possibly an afternoon slot in the future, get a hold of us on Discord or in the comments here and let us know if you're interested in that. It would be cool to have other hosts who are interested in doing a show like this. So definitely let us know if you're interested in that. And from there, I'll just jump right into it. The first article today is from Reason.com, written by Joe Setyin. Written by Joe Setyin. FDA threatens e-cigarette companies with product removal. It's the latest development in the FDA's war on vaping. The Food and Drug Administration gave 21 electronic cigarette companies a choice today: either prove their products aren't breaking FDA rules or be forced to stop selling them. The agency's latest crackdown against vaping manufacturers is not particularly surprising. Rather, it's just the latest development in the FDA's war on vaping. In a press release, the agency said it sent letters to 21 companies about whether more than 40 products, including some flavored e-cigarette products, are being illegally marketed and outside the agency's current compliance policy. As CNBC notes, e-cigarette products introduced after August 8, 2016 need FDA approval before they can go on the market. The agency apparently believes some products are being sold without the relevant approval. FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb has now threatened the companies with enforcement actions. Companies are on notice. The FDA will not allow the proliferation of e-cigarettes or other tobacco products potentially being marketed illegally and outside of the agency's compliance policy, and we will take swift action when companies are skirting the law, he says. If products are being unlawfully marketed and outside the FDA's compliance policy, we'll act to remove them. The companies warned included 3 major players in the industry: British American Tobacco, Imperial Brands, and Japan Tobacco. Spokespeople for BAT and Japan Tobacco both tell CNBC their products are in compliance with FDA rules. An Imperial Brands spokesperson, meanwhile, tells Reuters that its MyBlue e-cigarette products are in compliance as well. Juul Labs Inc., easily the most popular e-cigarette manufacturer in the U.S., did not receive a letter. That's because the FDA recently conducted an unannounced on-site inspection of its corporate headquarters, which sought similar information about its marketing practices, the agency says. The FDA has been regulating tobacco products since 2009, but only since 2016, as the agency also had authority over the e-cigarette industry, according to Bloomberg. Gottlieb is particularly worried about the effect of vaping on teenagers, Last month, in fact, his agency threatened to ban vaping products unless manufacturers could figure out how to stop teens from using them. Given the explosive growth of e-cigarette use by kids, we're committed to taking whatever measures are appropriate to stem these troubling use trends, Gottlieb said Friday. But Gottlieb's crusade against vaping is misguided. As reasons, Jacob Sullum explained last month what Gottlieb refers to as an unfortunate trade-off is potentially deadly. Research shows that often it's the various flavors that help adults make the switch from combustible tobacco to e-cigarettes by impeding adults' access to e-cigarettes in an effort to stop teens from vaping. The FDA is deterring smokers from choosing the safer alternative. Plus, while teenage use of e-cigarettes among teenagers seems to be on the rise, adolescent smoking rates are going down. So that article is basically continuing the FDA's war on vaping now. I guess that's the latest moral panic or whatever, the latest outrage over teenagers now is that they're all starting to use these e-cigarette things and since the only way the idiots in this country know how to deal with anything is to ask the government to step in, I guess that's what's happening. Again, the FDA deciding to come in and throw its weight around and threaten these companies for not doing enough to stop teenagers from using their products, which is ridiculous as hell. I mean, if you're gonna base laws on companies not being able to stop kids from using their products, like, then there's nothing left in this fucking country. I mean, if you can't take responsibility for your own goddamn children, like, what can you do? I mean, it's on these kids' parents to deal with that. It's not on companies to somehow stop teenagers from using their products. That's never happened ever. I mean, this talk, there's all this talk about how vaping is safer than cigarettes. It's like, well, cigarettes aren't. You can't stop teenagers from using cigarettes either. You can't now. You couldn't 10 years ago when I was in high school. You couldn't, whenever. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know. It's just, this is why we can't have nice things, because people are too lazy to take responsibility for their own actions, their own children, and their own lives, and desperately ask the government to do it for them. And this is why we can't have anything good in this country anymore, because everyone's too stupid to make their own decisions and think, well, if I don't want to smoke, don't need to smoke. If I don't want my kids to smoke, maybe I should pay attention to them instead of playing Angry Birds all the goddamn time. These things just never occur to people. It's really tiresome. I mean, it's hilarious. The opening of the article says, if the companies can't prove they're not breaking the law, how the fuck do you prove a negative? You can't prove a negative. You can't prove, it's not their burden to prove they're not breaking the law. If they're breaking the law, then the FDA should have an easy time of stripping, their rights to sell these products or whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous. What does that even mean? You have to prove you're not deliberately selling to children. What the hell does that even mean? It makes no sense. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. This is just really irritating to me. I mean, and I know, of course, this is a smaller issue than a lot of things that are talked about on this show, but it just really gets under my skin because it just shows that people are willing to be, stupid and ridiculous and, let the government dictate what's right and wrong and what's healthy and not healthy, and they can't make their own decisions. And if people are that stupid and lazy, then you're not going to have any liberty left. I mean, if people are willing to have, if they're saying, mama government, father government, whatever, you need to take care of me because I'm too stupid to do it myself. I mean, that's like the end times for any type of freedom. I don't really know where people go from there if they can't even do that. But yeah, I mean, I remember in 2009 when Obama first gave the FDA more regulatory power over cigarettes, in which he banned these clove cigarettes that used to be that were really popular, just because apparently the FDA and whoever believed that those were flavored, quote unquote. They had this different type of flavor to them than regular cigarettes. And so that meant, nope, it means children are gonna like it, so we have to ban it. And, took that away. But of course, there's a way around it, and now they still sell them, but they slightly change them so that they're not categorized as cigarettes, and they're categorized as cigars now, and so they're still out there in the U.S. market. And they just got around the regulations. I don't know. All of this is just a game, I guess. This is how the parasites who work for the government make money, just make shit up, make up fake crises, and go get jobs to bully companies for creating products that people have a voluntary choice whether or not they use or not. It's just too much. I don't even know anymore. It's too goddamn much. But yeah, I don't know. In any event, I'll move on to the next article. Let me check out the comments here. Danielle says, bad morning to you, Danielle. Always good to see you. Danielle says, I agree that making a company responsible for who uses their product is pretty nuts. Find the parents, perhaps. See how well that works. Yeah, I mean, it's sad because it's this cycle of people being dependent on government, and so many people now, just with the job market, people are working all the time, and I assume a lot of people probably feel like they don't have the time to watch their kids, which is in part due to the government, reducing the value of the dollar, over the years of constantly raising the debt ceiling and all of that. So now you can't even have, parents stay at home anymore in order to make ends meet most of the time. And so now kids are left alone more, and, it's this endless cycle. And I've heard people say, I'm too busy, uh, when presented with the argument that it's the parents' responsibility to make sure their kids aren't doing stuff they don't want them to do. People will come back at that with saying, well, I'm so busy, I have to work all the time to make ends meet, and I can't watch my children. And so I want the government to step in to make these laws to, quote unquote, protect the children. But I mean, it just does not work. It doesn't work. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I know that from personal experience. So, but again, I think other things that the government is doing with the economy is contributing to destroying the ability of parents to guide their kids and be there for them, and being, worked to death. It's just kind of this cycle, unfortunately. Um, Danielle says, I like clove cigarettes, and now you can hardly find them. I think they just don't want imported smokes. Yeah, I agree. That's what I thought at the time as well, because I remember I used to buy those, the Dejarum clove cigarettes. I used to buy those. Uh, and then it was like a year later after I turned 18, is when Obama went and banned them. And I remember thinking at the time that, and it was mentioned at the time by the company that makes those Dejarums, that it was a protectionist thing. Basically, they were protecting the U.S. makers of regular cigarettes against the influence of that company, because the company that made those Dejarums is from Indonesia, I believe. And I think that company even filed a suit in like the World Trade Organization or something, saying that it was a protectionist measure. That they're enacting these regulations just to force them out of the market in the U.S. So that That definitely would make a lot of sense. And yeah, as I said, it's hard. Yeah, it is harder to find them. I've seen them around being sold uh, as cigars now, and I think it's again ridiculous because just another example of the arbitrary nature of all of these regulations, where cigarettes are so highly regulated that um, you know. Uh, but then at the same time, cigars are not nearly as strictly regulated. And the only difference, according to the government, between a cigarette and a cigar is that a cigar is wrapped in tobacco or tobacco paper, and cigarettes are wrapped in just paper. And so I've seen the company that makes Dejarums uh, come out with a little cigar that's almost the same size as a cigarette, but they're wrapped in a tobacco paper now and not just a plain paper, and that's how they're trying to get around the regulation for now. But yeah, we'll see. Danielle says there was a Balkan brand of cigarettes that you can no longer find here at all. That could have something to do with war there in Clinton's time. Yes, Indonesia. The Balkan cigarettes were called Sobrani and came in different types. Oh, that's interesting. That one I have not heard of Sobrani. Um, yeah, I haven't heard of that one, but that's definitely interesting. I wonder if that has to do with the whole Clinton Clinton years and his history of bombing the Balkans. And move to the next article. From Reason. This is falsely accused a black 9-year-old boy of groping her. Surveillance footage disproves her allegations and reminds everyone not to automatically believe victims. A cell phone video of a white woman calling the cops on a 9-year-old black boy outside a Brooklyn convenience store went viral on social media last week. In the video, the woman, nicknamed Cornerstone Caroline on Twitter, claims that kid grabbed her butt while she was in line at the store. Now, surveillance footage from inside the store has been released, and it proves that the boy did no such thing. The accusation was, without question, 100% false. The woman offered an apology after viewing the surveillance footage, though some have questioned her sincerity. The original video, in which the woman can be seen on the phone with a 911 dispatcher as the boy cries and his mother argues with her, was viewed more than 5 million times. Many sympathized with the young boy, wondering what kind of person would immediately involve law enforcement in a matter involving a child. The surveillance footage explicitly disproved the woman's account. It clearly showed the boy walking past the woman without touching her. His backpack grazed her body, prompting her freakout. If we're being maximally charitable to the woman, she didn't outright lie, she was just deeply mistaken about what happened and eager to weaponize her error against a kid's future. I couldn't help but notice a perceptive first comment on the write up of this incident at The Root, a progressive news site that covers race issues. It reads, "Serious question. How do we square the idea that women don't make false accusations and should be believed with the fact that white women have used false accusations as weapons against black men and black people generally throughout this country's history?" This is a good question that should vex more people on the left. Many fourth wave feminists contend that women who make allegations of sexual misconduct must always and automatically be believed. The Me Too movement, in their view, is an opportunity not just to hold powerful abusers accountable, but to rebalance the scales of justice to reflect the idea that false accusations are virtually non existent. This deeply illiberal approach rests on the assumption that false accusations are so uncommon as to be practically ignorable, but in truth, we can't definitively say that false allegations are as low as 2 to 8%, the statistic often cited by activists. The available data are flawed and unreliable. Some allegations are technically false but impossible for the police to explicitly disprove. The infamous Rolling Stone University of Virginia gang rape hoax, for instance, would not be counted as false in any police database. It also turns Western notions of justice on their head. Even if most men accused are guilty of sexual assault, that doesn't mean we should rush to judgment in each individual case. Even as we must treat accusers with seriousness and dignity, we must hear out the accused fairly and respectfully and recognize the potential lifetime consequences that such an allegation can bring, writes Emily Yoffe in an Atlantic article about the fallout from the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. If believing the woman is the beginning and the end of a search for the truth, then we have left the realm of justice for religion. We should expect the formal arbiters of justice, police, prosecutors, judges, juries, etc., to take an even handed approach to such cases, and we should want the informal arbiters of justice, media, activists, the broader public, to exercise some degree of caution. An activist culture at war with the principles of due process and the broader presumption of innocence is a bigger threat to black convenience store kids as it is to rich and powerful men. Justice for victims must not come at the expense of fairness for the accused. Yeah, so that's the end of that article. I heard about this a little over the weekend. I guess, this woman accused a 9-year-old kid of touching her inappropriately, I guess, and after she saw the video, I guess she apologized. But yeah, I mean, I find it bizarre that even if she, did believe that that was the case, it's bizarre to me that she'd immediately call 911. I mean, uh, especially on a little kid. I mean, you would think most people would think a kid doing something like that could just be an accident. I mean, you know how kids can be just moving around a lot and all that. I mean, a lot of times they don't really pay attention to who they're hitting or if they're brushing against someone or whatever. I mean, just from my experience of being in a big city, being in highly populated areas, especially places like public transportation. If you're like on the bus, I mean, there's all kinds of people rubbing up against you all the time. If that's sexual, assault, then I've been assaulted many times by people just being in close proximity and accidentally bumping against you and accidentally touching you, and especially as what was mentioned that the kid's backpack maybe brushed her. I mean, shit, that happens to me like every day. Somebody's, if not somebody's actual body brushing against you, then certainly their backpack or their shopping bags often will come into contact with you because that's just life. And I don't I've never considered calling 911 over it. Um, so it's a really questionable judgment on her part, even if she believed that such a thing happened. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe this happened in what, Brooklyn? I don't know. I've heard that people in New York are just, miserable people a lot of times. So maybe it's an example of just people being mean and not being willing to like take a step back and think, how can I resolve this in a way that doesn't call in cops who would be happy to shoot the kid dead, probably. And not because of race, just because of the cops being the way they are. I don't think race has to do with it. It's mostly about why call in cops who see everyone as you know it's it's like the old analogy when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I mean, you're calling in a hammer for something that probably doesn't require that, and you're inviting danger into the situation. You're inviting cops in, you're inviting, the potential death of not even just the kid, but who knows, anyone who's in the proximity of the whole situation. Danielle says they were readily available in the 70s, referring to those the Sobrani cigarettes. That's interesting. That's cool. I wonder if I could find any anywhere online. Actually, I don't think it's illegal to buy cigarettes online either anymore. But yeah, Danielle says, "LOL at deeply mistaken. Perhaps Dr. Ford was also deeply mistaken." Good question. I mean, that's the question underlying a lot of these cases is that people make mistakes even if they're not outright lying purposefully. They could be mistaken, and so why throw people in a cage and just totally throw them under the bus and assume that the person making the allegation is 100% correct in their side of the story. I mean, that's just the reality. There's a lot of things that fall into gray areas. There's a lot of things that one person will find offensive, another person won't find offensive. Things that one person will brush off, the other person will apparently, find to be an assault, as in the previous story, or in this given example with the kid. It's just really bad practice to jump to conclusions and decide people must be guilty just because someone's accusing them and totally locking them up and throwing away the key, which seems to be what the left wants to do nowadays, which makes no sense to me. Um, they always used to be, I thought at least, they were the party that was on the side of like reducing the amount of people in prisons and stuff. And like, how can you claim to support reducing the amount of prisoners in the U.S. and reducing mass incarceration and all of that? I mean, how that's completely at odds with the idea of believe every accusation completely on its face with no evidence. I mean, if you go down that route, then everyone's just going to be in jail, basically. Um, which, ironically, is what a lot of liberals claim to be against, you know. And as well as the added aspect of the left versus the left, as was given in the article with this leftist site that talks about race, and then you know saying, well, which one comes first? It's these oppression Olympics that the left plays. Is it worse to be black? Is it worse to be a woman? So now, yeah, how would they answer that question? Do you believe do you believe the woman because they're all about just believing the accuser, or do you believe the kid, or do you believe she's privileged because she's white? Making the accusation against a black kid. I mean, you can't win when you look at things through this identity politics lens. There's no way of winning. The only way the only real way forward is to base things on evidence and not on emotion and not on race and not on these ideas of who's more oppressed or whatever because of one of their characteristics. It's just, crazy. I don't know how the left is gonna come out of this. It seems like they're at the end of the rope with just the amount of infighting and whatnot. I'll check out the comments again. Danielle says this issue is ripe for being taken to an extreme, which is exactly what is happening. I agree. Without evidence, the presumption of innocence should prevail. They want to do that as long as the accused is right of their politics. And Daniel also says, I predict that this whole house of cards will fall, but not without more innocent people suffering. Yeah, I think that's a good observation or a good prediction. Yeah, it's we'll just have to see who's going to be the next, who's going to be the next scapegoat for the left. We'll just have to see because they're going to keep fighting till the end and probably just getting more and more insane until their end. All right. Let's see. Another article here from Free Thought Project. This article at Agrist. Cops attack cancer patient, beat him to a pulp, dump him at the hospital. Galveston, Texas. Isaac Walton, father of three, is fighting for his life in a battle against leukemia. Now, however, he's also fighting police after he said multiple officers beaten, tasered, and then dumped at a hospital for no reason. They abused their authority pretty much, thinking they can do what they want with people, said Walton, who says cops had no reason to even approach him that day. The incident happened as Walton and his family were staying at a hotel in Galveston to celebrate his daughter's birthday. Walton left the hotel that morning to go get the family breakfast, and he says he stopped briefly at the sea wall to take a stroll. The next thing I know, I felt somebody grab me, and I grabbed my right arm, and this time I realize it's a police officer, said Walton. Immediately I say, Sir, I have a PICC line on this side, and I have leukemia, and they didn't listen to anything I have to say. A PICC line, for those who may be unfamiliar, is a catheter implanted in a cancer patient's arm, which is used to administer the chemotherapy drugs. According to Walton, one officer grabbed him and began beating him while another tasered him. He was then thrown in the back of a squad car. The only thing I can think about was trying to get out of that situation safely without pretty much dying, Walton said. They beat him, they put handcuffs on him, throw him in the back of a car. They don't charge him with anything. They tell him he's not under arrest. Then they drop him off at an emergency room and they just leave him there, said Joe Matthew, an attorney representing Walton, said. After being dumped at the hospital, Walton finally made it back to the hotel where his family found him slumped over in pain. They immediately drove him to MD Anderson Cancer Center where his wife took photos of his injuries, and they contacted the University of Texas Police Department, who filed an incident report despite not charging Walton with a crime. At the time, days later, he'd been charged with resisting arrest, a move Walton says is an attempt to cover up for the officer's criminal behavior. The only ones who should be charged in this incident are the police officers who did this to him, Walton's attorney said. In response to why they waited several days to issue a warrant for resisting arrest, the police released the following statement. On Wednesday, August 15th, 2018, at approximately 9:57 a.m., the Galveston Police Department received two 911 calls requesting that the police check the welfare of a male later identified as 32-year-old Isaac Walton as he was out on a jetty in the 3000 block of Seawall Boulevard. During their encounter with Walton, he refused to follow commands given by officers to further their investigation and was subsequently arrested for resisting arrest and transported him to the Galveston County Jail, where jail medical staff refused to accept Walton until he was declared fit for incarceration by an attending doctor. Officers subsequently transported Walton to UTMB and released him and requested a warrant for his arrest be issued for the aforementioned charge. The warrant request for the charge of resisting arrest, search, or transport was completed by the officer on August 15th and was submitted to the court the next morning. On Thursday, the Galveston Police Department was made aware of the allegations against the officers later that evening, at which point the chief of police initiated an investigation into the officers' conduct. The judge subsequently signed and issued the warrant the following Monday, August 20th, at which point the warrant became active and was entered into the state and national registry. Walton was then detained by League City Police during a traffic stop on September 7th, arrested for the active warrant, and transported to the Galveston jail. The internal investigation has since revealed that the involved officers' actions did not appear to violate policy. To date, Walton has not filed an official complaint with the Galveston PD. It appears that there are some questions concerning the timeline of events due to the gap between the warrant being filed and the arrest. Hopefully, this explains the sequence. And since the criminal case is still pending, we are not able to comment on the details of the criminal case. Walton, who is still battling leukemia, says that police fabricated this story to cover up what they did to him. Even if police were responding to a welfare check request, Walton had harmed no one. How is it somehow considered okay for cops to walk up to an innocent man, begin demanding that he obey their every command, and then beat the hell out of him for not doing so fast enough? Walton's family also GoFundMe site to help with some of the medical bills. Yeah, so that's the end of that article. I find that pretty bizarre. I don't really know what's going on there. I'm trying to figure out. I guess someone called for a welfare check on this guy, the guy in question. Yeah, so I don't know what caused that. Was it his family? Was his family worried about him? Did they think he was not well or something while he was out? It said he was out getting breakfast. So did they ask cops to do a welfare check on him? And then, of course, because I guess he had a natural reaction to being approached by cops, which is not necessarily to be completely compliant at every turn. And apparently that became him resisting arrest, and now they claim to have that charge against him. I don't know, but I mean, just personally, I completely understand, why someone wouldn't immediately just submit to cops coming up to them out of nowhere. I mean, I don't understand these people who say, if you just do what the cops say, it'll all be fine. It's like, it's not natural to be just a human being and be out and doing things, and then cops come up and start demanding you just start, get on the ground or whatever it is. It's bizarre. I mean, I wouldn't just, my first reaction to some random person coming up to me is not to just immediately obey and submit. I mean, I think maybe that's a good analogy for why our society is like it is. I guess if apparently a lot of people think that is what they would do immediately upon being ordered to out of nowhere to obey commands from cops. They just do it without question. I guess that says a lot about about the type of people with that mindset, because I don't find that natural at all. I don't find it natural to just submit, or with the cases where the cops do a no-knock raid on the house. Why would a normal person not be concerned if there's people breaking their door down in the middle of the night, and they don't even announce themselves as cops or anything? I mean, of course, people will shoot back. That's natural. And then in some cases, people have gotten charged. Cops who were breaking into their home in the middle of the night unannounced, even though that's, again, a natural reaction. So, again, I would just say don't get the cops involved in a welfare check, especially because, again, this is how it can end. If you think you want them to do just a welfare check and that it won't escalate, it's wrong to assume that because anything can escalate, as we just discussed with the previous article. And hitting up some comments here. Let's see. Okay. Gregory Patrick says, yo. Hey, Gregory Patrick, good to see you. Danielle says, resisting arrest for what? Isn't a charge required for an arrest? Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I don't really know. It's confusing. Danielle says, a welfare check doesn't mean one assumes some crime. Gregory Patrick says, it happens all the time in New Hampshire, but most are in complete denial of police brutality here. Danielle says, a bit thin on the cause of all this. Danielle says, here too, people have been shot for no good reason. Gregory Patrick says, cops are too used to being judged, dread, and they have too much trust. They flip out if things don't go their way. Yeah, I think that's at the bottom of a lot of it. It's they get angry when people don't immediately submit. It's like they just come up out of nowhere, or do a no-knock raid in the middle of the night, and they expect people to just like prostrate themselves on the floor, and like I don't see how that's a natural response, but to them that gives them license to say you're resisting, and then that you then deserve to be shot or whatever, or beaten up and dragged into jail. So Danielle says, who requested the welfare check and why is my first question. That's what I'm wondering as well. It's not clear in this article, but we'll see if any more information comes out, and I'll keep you guys updated if there is an article with any more details on that. All right. The next article is from Activist Post. A company, a monopoly, CBD. This is written by Carrie Wedler. News circulated recently that the DEA had rescheduled cannabidiol, CBD, the non-psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, but the technicalities of the agency's decision actually show their ruling is highly restrictive. The decision concerned a recently FDA-approved pharmaceutical version of CBD produced by GW Pharmaceuticals. Due to the federal government's continued prohibition of cannabis, Epidiolex was prohibited from going to market unless the DEA rescheduled CBD. That's what the agency did, leading some to believe that since this FDA-approved medication is pure cannabidiol, that all CBD products fall into the same category, Forbes noted. But that is not the case. The DEA decision applies only to FDA-approved drugs, meaning they have just granted GW Pharmaceuticals a monopoly on plant-derived CBD. Hemp-derived CBD is no longer restricted. The DEA said as much in a statement to NBC affiliate WTHR. What this does not do is legalize or change the status of CBD oil products, DEA spokesperson Rusty Payne said. As of right now, any other CBD product other than Epidiolex remains a Schedule 1 controlled substance, so it's still illegal under federal law. There is misunderstanding that cannabis or CBD will be immediately rescheduled, but that is not the case. It will be Epidiolex itself, attorney Sean Hauser told Forbes. Hauser, a senior associate with Denver-based Vicente Cederberg LLC and director of law firms Hemp and Cannabinoid Group, sorry about that, said the media had misconstrued the DEA's decision. What is getting scheduled is the Epidiolex itself pursuant to the new drug application relating to its medical efficacy and low potential for abuse. That will inform the federal law for the future. Marijuana is still a Schedule 1 substance. CBD is not scheduled itself, but as a substance derived from marijuana. Despite the approval of GW Pharmaceuticals' CBD product under federal law, no other plant-based CBD is allowed. This prohibition is the basis of an adolescent girl's lawsuit against the Department of Justice, through which she is fighting to be able to use her CBD medication, which she uses to treat epilepsy in all parts of the country, as opposed to just Colorado, where her family moved from Texas in order to access it. For now, the DEA's decision on Epidiolex simply means a giant corporation enjoys the perks of government rulemaking, and it will likely be other pharmaceutical companies that reap the benefits. As Leafly writer Ben Adlin clarified, the rescheduling move does open the door for additional high CBD medicines to enter the U.S. market, however, and it will likely attract other CBD drug makers to jump in, but many popular products in existing medical cannabis markets, such as Canada or certain U.S. states, will be ineligible due to the amount of THC they contain. The decision does make some research into CBD less restricted, but for now it will only apply to studies conducted on Epidiolex. Ryan Vandry, an associate professor at Johns Hopkins University Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, who studies the pharmacology of cannabis, explained the implications as reported by the university's news service, The Hub. With the DEA's decision, the door is at least ajar for more sophisticated research, but Vandry notes that it would take a broader reclassification of CBD overall to see clinical trials using anything beyond Epidiolex. For now, research is still otherwise limited. For example, Vandry is currently conducting a study using a pure synthetic CBD formulation that remains a Schedule 1 substance and requires extra DEA regulation and oversight. Such constraints, he says, slow down the development of new drugs containing not only CBD but all other marijuana compounds. Nevertheless, Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health researcher Caleb Alexander, who headed the FDA advisory committee that suggested the agency approve Epidiolex, believes times are changing. I think this will stimulate further investigation into the potential medicinal value of different components of the marijuana plant. He said, "We're not talking about one or two chemicals here. There are dozens." And that's the end of that article. And unfortunately, not surprising that the FDA is basically just handing, a specific corner of the market a license to be allowed to use this certain substance, and others that are around or have been existing for a while can't, are still prevented and are still, illegal apparently according to the federal government. But yeah, I think this is what I've thought for a while, that it would take for the pharmaceutical companies to be able to get their hooks into the market before the government will go ahead and loosen the strict anti-cannabis laws. They're just waiting for a way to let the pharma companies become cronyist and get a handle on the market before they open it up, I think. And it's not surprising at all. And I think overall, it's Big Pharma who is afraid of legalization of cannabis in the states and the states where it is legal so far, because it treats so many things. I mean, I'll be very honest. It treats a lot of things and has virtually no side effects compared to all the fucking garbage that's peddled by the big pharmaceutical companies, which has all manner of ridiculous and horrifying side effects. Just as somebody, I've tried out a lot of pharmaceutical antidepressants in my lifetime, and they none of them have worked like at all. But they all have ridiculous side effects, and that's what the government and FDA is in bed with these companies to push on us, is to use those things to try and treat different ailments, where when there's already a treatment out there that's been proven safe and has been safely used since probably the beginning of time, or the beginning of humanity in any case. But of course, it's still being treated as though it's just, some horrible thing, according to our government. Checking the comments. Let's see what you guys have to say on this. Let me try to get comments working here. Okay, Daniel says, re-CBD, what a convoluted ruling. I agree. Gregory Patrick says, Jeff Sessions needs to go, and the Fed rules on cannabis need to be thrown out. Amen, amen to both of you there. It's really disgraceful, honestly. It's disgraceful to read that there's kids who need treatment for epilepsy, and they can't even be treated in like their states that still have CBD ban, like Texas and whatever. And that this girl mentioned in this article moved to Colorado just so she could use CBD to treat her epilepsy, and it's been shown to be a very, very effective treatment for kids and people of all ages. And just to clarify again, you can use, these kids can use a form or a certain this CBD is a certain just one of the compounds present in cannabis that has the same medical benefits, but it doesn't even have the actual high or the psychoactive effects. So if people are out there still saying, oh, kids are getting high, well, they don't even need to get high in order to use cannabis for their benefit to treat epilepsy or other things. So it's all just fear mongering and ridiculousness out there in the minds of people who are still against this. Daniel says his heart is really in DHS. He should have been made head of that, if anything, referring to Sessions. And Danielle says, yes, it's cruel to those children. And Gregory Patrick says, absolutely. So, I mean, I really hope that, all of this DEA, scheduling of cannabis as a Schedule 1 drug goes away soon. I feel like it's reaching a breaking point where I just don't see how they can continue much longer I feel like the majority of Americans really see that this is just ridiculous. So I don't know how much longer complete prohibition will continue at the federal level, but hopefully sooner rather than later on that. Danielle says CBD isn't THC. Come on. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I live in Washington State, and there's tons of cannabis stores around, and people can walk in there and get CBD products. They can get, things tailored to whatever they need if they want. If they don't be high, they can get CBD and, that to treat all kinds of ailments without even having the impairment of potentially being high. Or you can get high if that's what you want, because we're all individuals. We all have the right to determine what we do with our own bodies, which I thought uh, was supposed to be something that Americans believed in, and something that government believed in. I mean, even Ronald Reagan said the government shouldn't be here to protect us from ourselves. Not that he really followed through on that quote, but you know, it's something that a lot of people have overlooked over the years and continue to just view themselves as free when the government is throwing people in jail for things that they voluntarily use, and have killed no one compared to pharmaceutical drugs, which have killed all kinds of people, as we know. And I actually might have to end it here. Have somebody outside cutting the grass, so might have to cut it a bit short today. Don't want to have too much background noise. But thank you guys for joining. Thanks, Gregory and Danielle, for being here. And today has been episode 61 of Bad Morning News, October 15, 2018. I'll just reiterate, we're looking for more hosts, so if you're interested in that, give us a shout on Discord or in the comments. And yeah, I'll probably have to end it there for today. But I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a bad morning, everybody. Thanks for being with us.